plundering and basically bullying his way around. And he just got actually embarrassed by Shiva, you know, and after getting trapped under Kailas Hill for 100 years, screaming in agony, and saying all these prayers to Lord Shiva over and over again from the Vedas, Lord Shiva finally said, "Oh, all right, you know, and, okay, so you know my prayers." So, and you know, he came before the Lord and for him, "What do you want?" He said, "I want." What did he say? A pop quiz here.
Your weapon.
Yes. If you really believe me, or if you really are accepting my prayers and pleased with me, then you give me your weapon. And then Lord Shiva smiled, thinking, knowing that yes, he's going to get smashed anyway, so I'll give it to him. And then how did he do it?
The mantras appeared in his mind.
Yes, he gave him the mantras in his mind and gave him the ability to remember them when he needed them. And this rascal is thinking he's the all in all, you know. Okay, so now he hasn't learned any lessons in all these different personalities he's met and tried to bully and gotten cursed every time or embarrassed or whatever. And then we're going on with the prologue. Ravana went up to the heavenly planets, inhabited by the principal gods. But the gods swiftly ran away, unwilling to encounter him in battle. They knew of the inviolable boons of Brahma. It was pointless fighting with the demon. The gods prayed to Vishnu, hiding themselves in fear. Ravana decided to rest for a while in heaven. He went to Amaravati, the city of Indra, king of the gods. As the Rakshasa was seated in the celestial Nandana gardens, he saw an Apsara, a heavenly nymph named Ramba. The face of that celestial girl shone with incomparable beauty, and she was adorned with bright garlands and jewels. Her soul-captivating eyes glanced here and there, and her fleshy hips swayed as she moved. Ravana gazed upon her large round breasts and shapely thighs. Her hands, soft like rose petals, pulled her shining blue dress tight around her body as she saw the demon staring at her. Ravana assumed a godly form of great splendor, concealing his terrible 10-headed body. He sprang to his feet and quickly went over to Ramba, immediately taking her by the hand. Completely overcome by lust, he smiled at the celestial girl. "Where do you go? And whose are you, lovely lady?" he asked. "Who will today enjoy the nectar of your soft red lips? Who will be blessed by the touch of your tender breasts? Which fortunate man will lie tightly embraced by you, his mind completely captured by carnal delights?" Ravana was not at all concerned whether she was married or not. He had stolen the wives of gods, Gandharvas, and demons everywhere, taking them to Lanka to join his harem. The Rakshasa was accustomed to having his way and spoke only in attempts to win over Ramba. He praised her divine beauty and told her of his own power and glory. What woman would refuse the opportunity to become the consort of the mighty Ravana? But the beautiful girl did not reciprocate his advances. She pulled away from him, her tight bracelets falling to the ground as she wrested herself from Ravana's grasp. Folding her palms and looking down, she addressed the Rakshasa reproachfully. "Please, do not speak in this way. I am as good as your daughter, and I therefore deserve to be protected by you, O Ravana. Indeed, I am the wedded wife of another." Ramba told him she was married to the god Nalakuvara, who was the son of Kuvera, Ravana's own brother. She was thus related to Ravana, and he should not make amorous advances towards her. Ravana laughed loudly. He had no regard for whatsoever for any moral codes. He moved towards Ramba, who ran behind a golden bush. Ravana pursued her, pulling off his red silk robes and revealing his immense, lustrous body. The maiden tried to evade him, dodging here and there with a garland and necklaces swinging, but it was useless. Taking hold of Ramba, the Rakshasa forcibly laid her across a nearby rock. He snatched off her garments and began ravishing her. His eyes expanded in delight. Ramba cried out for help, but seeing the fierce Rakshasa, no one dared intervene. The demon's powerful hands pinned the white arms of the maiden against the rock. Her dark hair fell in disarray, its golden clasps and flowers dislodged. Ravana violently molested her in front of his demon followers. Although she begged him to desist, the Rakshasa took that struggling heavenly girl against her desire. After Ravana had sated his lust, he stood up, fastening his waistcloth. Shedding tears, Ramba backed away from the demon and fled, her clothes torn and her garlands crushed. She went before her husband. When he saw her in that condition, Nalakuvara became infuriated. But when he heard it was Ravana who had raped her, he felt helpless. The demon had already defeated Nalakuvara's powerful father, who was supported by innumerable Raksha warriors. There was no possibility of facing Ravana in a fight. Nalakuvara considered the situation carefully. Although he could not fight the demon, he could at least curse him as a result of his evil act. The righteous curses of the gods invoked the infallible power of Vishnu. Considering this the only means of punishing Ravana, Nalakuvara touched holy water and then uttered his imprecation. This evil Rakshasa has violated a celestial lady. If he ever again rapes another maiden, he will immediately fall dead. That's what saves Sita. Ravana soon heard of that curse. He had seen such curses made by gods and rishis come to pass many times. Once uttered, they could not be retracted. Although he did not like to accept it, Ravana could understand that some powerful force maintained the universal order and laws. Thinking it possible that Nalakuvara's words might just be effective, he decided not to again force himself upon another female. Better not to take any chances. After all, there were enough women who would willingly accept him. Being disappointed that no gods would fight with him, Ravana left the heavenly planets. He began heading for the southern quarter of the universe, where lived the Danavas and Daityas, the most powerful celestial demons. Surely they would afford him battle. Who else was there left for him to conquer? As Ravana flew in the Pushpaka, he suddenly saw ahead of him the celestial seer, Narada, shining brightly and holding his tambura. The seer plucked the strings gently, singing the praises of Vishnu. Ravana had met him many times before, and he was pleased to see him. The Rakshasa usually had little time for sages, especially devotees of Vishnu. He preferred to eat and kill them, to kill and eat them, rather than speak with them. The rishis and seers generally favored the gods, but Narada was different. He would often give Ravana good advice and seemed to be his well-wisher. Ravana raised a hand in salute to the sage. The seer came before Ravana and greeted him. Narada could travel freely anywhere in the universe. It was even said that he could leave the material worlds and journey to Vaikuntha, the spiritual abode of the Lord himself, which knows no decay and is free of all suffering. Narada smiled at Ravana. His large eyes were like two shining sapphires. On his head, his coiled golden hair was held in place by a jeweled silver band. Clad in the soft skin of a black reindeer, Narada stood in the air in front of Ravana, who invited him onto the chariot. Sitting cross-legged on a golden seat next to the demon, the seer began to address him in gentle and pleasing tones. Why are you harassing this world of humans, O valiant one? It is already in the grip of death. These people do not deserve to be attacked by you, Ravana, who cannot be overcome by even the entire heavenly host united together. Who would destroy people who were racked by numerous anxieties, surrounded by endless calamities, and are subject to old age and hundreds of diseases? Narada told Ravana that everyone in the material world would in time go to the abode of Yamaraj, the great lord of death. There was no need for Ravana to kill them. Death conquers all. Even the gods would eventually succumb to death. If Ravana should conquer Yamaraj, the entire universe would be conquered. The sage knew that Ravana could not overpower Yamaraj, but he wanted to distract the demon from his evil aim of killing more people and overthrowing the gods. He also wanted the Rakshasa to greatly increase his sinful actions by assailing the god of death. Ravana would thus create for himself a karmic destiny which would soon result in his own destruction. The demon pondered Narada's suggestion. This sounded interesting. He liked the idea of fighting with the immensely powerful Yamaraj. Perhaps this would be a battle worthy of him. And if Death himself were slain, then the whole universal order would be cast into utter chaos. That appealed to Ravana, who wanted to assert himself over any and all powers in the universe. He nodded slowly at Narada, who sat smiling at him. Ravana told the sage he would leave immediately for death's abode. As Narada rose up into the sky, playing upon his tambura, Ravana began heading toward the domain of Yamaraj, the god of justice. As Ravana approached the ethereal region known as Yamaloka, he saw everywhere living beings reaping the fruits of their actions. He also saw the millions of soldiers and servants of Yamaraj, known as the Yamadutas. They appeared fierce and unapproachable. Their bodies were powerful, but hideously deformed, covered all over with black hair that stood erect. In their hands they held nooses and terrible weapons. Their faces were contorted into frightful expressions, and they yelled and shrieked in dissonant tones. Moving swiftly, they struck and tortured people who were running in all directions. Fearful screams and cries resounded everywhere in that dark and desolate place. Ravana saw in hundreds and thousands people being eaten up by fierce dogs, consumed by fires, or being hurled into vats of boiling oil by the Yamadutas. Other unrighteous men and women were running here and there on burning sands, being pursued by Yamadutas holding lances and tridents. Some were being dragged through trees with leaves like steel razors that shred their bodies. Howling in terrible pain, they would fall to the ground, but their bodies would again become whole. They would then leap up and race off, only to be quickly caught by the Yamadutas and put through the same suffering again. Ravana witnessed innumerable kinds of punishment and meted out to sinful souls, being meted out to sinful souls. Searching for Yamaraj, he coursed on rapidly in the Pushpaka. In other parts of that mystical and indescribable region, Ravana saw people enjoying celestial delights by virtue of their own good deeds. It seemed as though they were situated in a separate dimension of space and time. Beautiful heavenly landscapes stretched out into the distance. Large shining mansions stood next to clear blue lakes. Young men and women with highly attractive forms were dressed in golden ornaments and garments and ornaments, embracing one another and laughing. Excellent food and drink were laid out on golden and silver tables. Musicians played and young girls danced. Ravana saw countless people intoxicated with pleasure and entirely oblivious to the scenes of suffering elsewhere. Leaving behind that glowing region of happiness, Ravana continued deeply into Yamaloka. He crossed over the broad Vaitarani river, which flowed with blood and excrement, and came to another dark terrain, where countless Yamadutas were relentlessly pursuing wicked persons. The terrible cackles, that's a nice word, cackles. The terrible cackles of the Yamadutas echoed there, along with the howls of jackals and wolves. Everywhere stood people who appeared emaciated and pale, seized with unbearable thirst and crying for water. Descending from his chariot, Ravana began to beat back the Yamadutas, freeing the people they were punishing. He felt no compassion for the pain of others, but he calculated that by oppressing the Yamadutas, he would cause Yamaraj to appear. Careful what you wish for. As the demon freed many thousands of wretched persons from their tormentors, he was suddenly attacked by a massed force of Yamadutas. They assailed Ravana with spears, iron bars, steel clubs, pikes, javelins, and maces. They rose up and began demolishing the seats, dais, pillars, and houses of the Pushpaka. But the indestructible chariot was immediately recreated by the power of Brahma, by whom it had first been fashioned. Ravana's Rakshasa forces fought back against the Yamadutas. Millions upon millions of servants of Yamaraj advanced in great waves. They rained down in unlimited numbers of arrows and other fierce weapons upon Ravana and his followers. The Rakshasas engaged with the Yamadutas, sending up their terrible war cries. The clash of weapons and the shouts of the warriors sounded like the roaring ocean tossed by a storm. Leaving off the other Rakshasas, the Yamadutas concentrated upon Ravana. Covered all over with their arrows, and bleeding profusely, the demon king appeared like a great mountain, giving forth streams of red lava. Using his knowledge of mystical weapons, the Rakshasa returned volleys of arrows, spears, maces, rocks, and huge trees. This fearful and deadly shower fell upon the forces of Yamaraj, who stood in front of Ravana. By whirling their maces and lances, the Yamadutas repelled all Ravana's missiles and surrounded him in thousands. They appeared like a mass of carnivorous ants around a large black beetle. Ravana became completely covered by darts and lances piercing every part of his body. He roared in anger and pain, quickly rising upwards from out of the midst of his assailants. Descending to the ground, he held his bow and placed upon it a blazing arrow. The demon invoked the power of Shiva, imbued the power with the divine force of that immortal god. As the weapon was released, a sheet of fire rushed across the ground, consuming Yamaraj's forces. Enormous orange and white flames leapt in all directions, burning the Yamadutas' bodies to ashes. The ground itself became molten, and the forces of Yamaraj fell back in a confused mass. In the flames' wake came innumerable ghostly followers of Shiva, filling the earth and sky with their terrifying forms. They rushed about the battlefield, striking fear into the Yamadutas' hearts. By the power of Shiva's weapon, waves of fearsome carnivorous beasts sprang up from the ground, howling horribly and tearing at the Yamadutas. Ravana sent up a victory cry, making the ground shake. Hearing that shout, Yamaraj, seated in his palace, could understand that Ravana was overpowering his forces. He ordered his chariot to be fetched and quickly mounted it. Yamaraj stood in his stupendous chariot with a lance and mace in his hands, Angered, the great god burned with a glaring radiance. By his side stood the personified form of Kaladanda, the infallible rod of death. His body a brilliant black and his eyes blazing like two red fires. On the other side of Yamaraj stood the very time spirit itself, himself, the destroyer of the worlds, fearful in appearance. Standing together, those three deities could not be countenanced. On all four sides of the chariot, which looked like a dark mountain, hung the frightful nooses of death. Drawn by 1,000 red and black steeds, shining with a bright luster and having 1,000 great wheels, the celestial chariot advanced with a terrible noise. Seeing that god moving off in anger, all the denizens of heaven trembled. In an instant, Yamaraj's chariot arrived at the spot where Ravana stood roaring. Ravana's followers immediately fled in all directions, simply upon seeing that awful chariot. Some of them fell unconscious on the spot. But Ravana himself was not afraid. Seeing his awful adversary, he felt overjoyed, anticipating the fight. The demon stood firm as Yamaraj hurled at him many blazing javelins and iron clubs. They struck Ravana with tremendous force, piercing him and causing streams of blood to flow from his body. Ravana raised his bow to counter Yamaraj's attack. Using sorcery, he fired thousands of straight flying arrows imbued with the force of a thunderbolt. Those arrows struck Yamaraj all over his body, but the god remained unmoved. Again and again, Ravana fired off his arrows and darts, charging them with celestial power. He struck all three deities with his fiery weapons, but they stood firm. Yamaraj sent back at the demon countless barbed lances which struck him violently in the breast. Stunned by those irresistible weapons, Ravana fell unconscious to the ground. Yamaraj, observing the rules of fair combat, did not further attack his overpowered enemy. After some time, Ravana came back to his senses and saw Yamaraj still stationed before him. He contemplated his next move. This was indeed a formidable opponent. Rarely was the demon extended in a fight. Ravana rallied himself and stretched his bow to full length, releasing celestial arrows which filled the sky. They fell upon Yamaraj like fiery serpents. Being assailed by those arrows and bleeding profusely, Yamaraj roared in anger. As he opened his mouth, fire covered by billows of smoke issued forth. The whole region was brilliantly illuminated by that fire, as if the sun itself had arisen in that ever dark place.